we're about to enter a beautiful time, at least for many countries in the world. This is a time where people come together to celebrate family, love, connection, union. And that's such a beautiful ideal. And what I want to talk about today is to normalize and to bring into awareness that it's okay to feel not so joyful and excited, not so filled with bubbly emotions about the upcoming holiday season, when we get to connect with those that we care for and we love. And yet there's a part of us that feels a little bit divided, a little bit uneasy about this whole process. And if you're feeling that, I just want to say congrats. Acknowledge that it takes a lot of courage to actually notice, become aware of this internal disconnect that may be going against what an entire structural, idealized set of thoughts and beliefs about how we should be experiencing all bubbles and joy. But the reality of it is it's a mixed bag of joy and sorrow. And so much of our longing to experience happiness gets in the way of acknowledging the pain. So today I want to talk to those that are ready to hear how to go about acknowledging that pain, because I have experienced the opposite of not recognizing the suffering, not recognizing the pain. And it takes a lot of internal work. So not everyone is ready to experience the ups and downs, because we're so wanting the ups that it's kind of difficult to acknowledge the downs. So we're going to try today to acknowledge the downs, to acknowledge the suffering, the pain that has not been spoken, either internally or with others. So you may fall into one of two groups, at least that came to mind as I was thinking of this. One could be you may want to welcome that family gathering, and you may not be sure why some people are not so keen or not so joyful as you are. That could be one set of group, and I used to fall a lot into that group of let's celebrate, but not necessarily even knowing like how to relate to the suffering of others. But there's another group, and that is potentially like the other side, the people that are actually feeling that pain, and they're not so keen in being on board with all the bubbly experiences because there's pain that has not been seen. And so with that in mind, I would like us to work together with this acknowledged pain, and to understand what could be happening. I put together 3 simple rules of thumb to help us dive inward. Because if we can at least acknowledge our unspoken pain, then we're more likely to be free to create space to see the thought systems that are working internally that keep us feeling disconnected or in tension. And if we can do that, then we're more capable, we have more capacity to now show up with presence wherever we go, and witness potentially the suffering of others and help alleviate it, which is like, once we can work with self. It's kind of like when you're in a plane and they say, put on your in a case of an emergency, bring yourself to safety with oxygen, and then bring oxygen to another person, right? So we first need to care for us. And once we're well suited and well established and balanced and present, now we can be of service to others that may be needing help. And a lot of times it's not about physical help, it's about emotional help. And so the structure that I thought about of looking into our own internal pain is the first step. And if you are in a capacity to now extend oxygen to others, emotional support to others, then I would love to hear from you, because that's actually what I feel like I'm in that space now where I want to speak more and share more about how to go about providing that safety to others. So for this weekend, let's start with self. Let's start with how we can acknowledge our own pain. And we have a perfect opportunity coming up. So if you have been invited to a gathering, or if you are inviting people to a gathering, let's look at any difficulty that you may be encountering that puts tension in that idealized experience of full happiness and connection, which is possible, but we need to first address what gets in the way of that experience fully manifesting. And that is the unspoken pain that if we don't see it, it continues to kind of poke until it's addressed. And then we have the experience that we seek. So I have three simple steps. And of course, it's not linear 1, 2, 3. It's more of a structure that we can work with. So it's not like one thing, it's a prerequisite to the other, but because I have to go in order, I will just start with the first thing to do, at least for me, is to call upon the love and the truest intention, the authentic, genuine desire to connect, this energy that is within all of us that wants to create that idealized experience of union. That is a real force. It's a force of love. It's a force of true connection. And that force can help us navigate any fear, because as we know, love is more powerful than fear. And so we start with calling upon that love to be the guiding principle. I have recently really enjoyed the visual of having Jesus or Buddha or something that you feel is greater than you, God, an angel, all the bodhisattvas, or whatever higher entity you can think of that holds your hand through the process. I've really been connecting with that lately. So that's one technique. Of course, prayer, intentions could be equally valid. So any tool that will help you connect with that sense of creation. And so as a side note, creation is different from an illusion, right? So what's the difference between creating and idealizing something that's unreal? It's basically calling in the qualities, the quality of connection, union, love, wisdom, balance, joy, compassion. These qualities are creative qualities that we can tap into. That's what I am referring to. So we call those in, and that's step number one. Then as we move on with this process is to acknowledge that whatever experience we're having is valid. So that's step number two. Because a lot of times we judge ourselves for the things we're feeling, which doesn't help at all, because the feeling is the feeling. And so if the feeling arises internally, we tend to identify with the feeling, and that creates so much confusion internally. Why I want to spend time with my family, but I can't make myself book the flight ticket. Why? Right? It's so there's a tension inside. So step number two is to validate your experience. Your experience is valid. And this is where eventually we can help others as well, because if our experience is valid, then we need to be able to extend that same courtesy to others, that their experience is valid. And so this is where there's so much tension between family members. If my experience is valid and it looks different from your experience, then I can't be wrong. So therefore, your experience is invalid, right? It's almost like we invalidate what's the experience of another person just because it's so different from ours. And so this is giving ourselves grace to accept that our experience is valid, but also accept that the experience of others is valid too. And with that as a framework, then step number three is to acknowledge the unspoken pain. And this is where we can sit. Actually, today is a perfect day. Tonight is a perfect night for it, to sit in silence for however long you need. It could be 5 minutes if you have 5 minutes, or it could be half hour if you have half hour, or it could be longer if you have the time for it. Just a willingness to acknowledge your pain, to understand. It's the first noble truth in the teachings of the Buddha. To end suffering, you first need to understand it. It's the first noble truth. So when we have the willingness to understand our suffering, now we need to have the courage to witness it, to see it internally, to feel it. And so if you are willing to undergo this process, ask yourself, what's in the way of my truest intention of showing up to this gathering? Like, why can't I book that flight? Or why can't I feel joyful about meeting XYZ? And see what naturally arises within your field. And that's the pain that needs to be seen and acknowledged. So, for example, I'm just going to throw some examples for the purposes of having something that you can just relate to, but you have to do this yourself. We all have to do it ourselves. One example can be, you're the oldest sibling and people have expected a lot of you, and they look up to you like this ideal thing that they aspire to be like, and that puts a lot of pressure on you, right? So that pressure needs to be acknowledged. That's the suffering that prevents a true seeing of each other during a meeting, during a gathering, because they're seeing you like in this idealized thing and you don't feel that way. That's one example. Another example could be that in the past, you had a relationship and now you have a new relationship, and there is like all these fears of judgment because people have judged other people in the past, and there is so much pain and rejection that it's kind of like felt from past experiences that haven't been healed. And there's like this fear of experiencing that pain again with the new partnership. For example, that I'm bringing stuff up as an example. Whatever the pain is, allow yourself to acknowledge that it's there and feel it. It's valid. Now, with that understanding, to bring wisdom to that feeling, we go about acknowledging that it's in the past. So the Course in Miracles tells us this. There's a little segment in chapter 16. I will not intrude my past upon my guests. So it's a way to recognize that the pain that we may be experiencing is from the past. And why would we bring the pain of the past to a new experience that hasn't even manifested yet? Because we're now bringing the past to the present, and that makes it continue to be part of our experience. So this is more of, now that the feeling has been acknowledged and validated and felt, kind of like expand. What could be a more expansive way to hold that pain, but also with an opening to a new potential to manifest in our experience? And so that could be one way to now, it's like, okay, so this is part of the past. Oh, I'm afraid of feeling that pain again. Oh, I felt so much pressure to, as an example, you could be a parent and you have, or a spouse, and throughout the years, it's almost like this. Actually, I'm talking about this one from experience. Like, there was a time in which it was like a gift one-upping, like every year, like one up in terms of gift giving. And it comes to a point in which it's unsustainable. Like, you can't, like, it's just so much pressure to surprise people with exotic more gifts. And it's not about that. It's not about that. It takes a lot of wisdom to recognize that it's not about that. And yet, of course, gifts are a love language. So it's all about balance. I'm just bringing up more examples of how we could be feeling this tension. And again, the 3-step process that I'm proposing is that we call upon the love and connection that's our truest intention. That's a real force that can hold us. What did I say number 2 was? To allow yourself to have your experience be valid, whatever it is arising for you, and understand it. And once you understand it and you feel it, bring about the idea of what could be more expansive now in this moment as you move forward, so that you can acknowledge the pain of the past and create space for a new experience to come in the present moment. So I'm going to leave it at that for this video. Happy solstice, winter solstice. Happy holidays if you celebrate the holidays wherever you are in the world. Happy New Year if you celebrate the traditional New Year. And let me know if this resonates, if you have questions. I am going to be starting the Intentional Evolution Intensive early next year in 2024. So stay tuned for that. Go to my website, fernmarierodriguez.com, and get the free 3-day training. And then from there, you will be invited to learn more about the upcoming opportunities to work together and to continue to expand into greater awareness, greater wisdom, greater love. Thank you for watching. Continue to trust yourself. Until next time.